for 60 more days. So based upon my review of both the city's code of ordinances and the charter, based upon my review of chapter 252, and based upon my review of Executive Order 20-52, although there is not a physical quorum in the room, you are in the middle of what's called exigent or emergency circumstances. And when there are such circumstances, there needs to be decisions made that relate to that emergency. That's the premise of today's meeting. And for the record, I know that Commissioner Good has logged in. He's online and is physically present as a virtual member of the commission, as is Commissioner Seipel and as is Vice Mayor Schwartz, all three of whom are interactive under the CMT guidelines, which the commission adopted. That being said, Mayor and Commission, you may legally proceed. And if you will allow me just one more minute of time to read into the record the process by which members of the public, if the mayor chooses to admit them for discussion, would be followed. That is, number one, the fact is that there has been proper legal notice. Let me repeat that for the record. The clerk has posted proper legal notice of this emergency meeting. The notice has been properly notified to those affected as well as the general public as well. Given the nature of the exigent circumstances, the public can participate via the following options, one of which is to phone in, and that phone number, which is posted and otherwise in the city's website, is 1-408-418-9388. That's 1-408-418-9388. And the meeting number for the record, and it's also posted and also online, is 173-597-7232. That's 173-597-7232. There may be folks who have pre-registered to be heard today, and those folks will be otherwise recognized by the clerk and by the mayor as appropriate to access the WebEx platform. At the time, the mayor would permit public comment to occur. Comments which are submitted via email will be read into the record, limited to the 3-minute rule under the current city code. Number two is the public who have pre-registered. There may be some who have done so. We don't know that for a fact. They will have the WebEx platform. Is Mr. Bonilla functioning for us today?
I don't know.
Okay, he is. So Mr. Bonilla has he'll know when people raise their hand. You have to push *3, and he'll know that you're at least in the queue to be heard in some form or fashion, and he'll so advise the mayor and commission. You'll be able to mute and unmute. It'll be important, Mayor, that you get the people's name, their address, et cetera, so they can be properly identified on the record. And lastly, for those who do not pre-register, but who have called in or seek to be access the process, they too will be given the proper information to dial into. We have the numbers have been previously given, and the last 4 digits, I believe, of the telephone number will be called upon, first name, last name, et cetera. All comments, whether called in by a phone or by the clerk from an email, are again, as I said, limited to 3 minutes. We're in some exigent emergency circumstances. My preference would be to have everybody on the dais, but unfortunately that's not the case. But I'm going to tell you that as a matter of public record and my legal analysis, given the status of where we are today and the circumstances, you may properly proceed to conduct this emergency meeting. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, City Attorney. Very well done.
Thank you.
Okay, I've called this emergency meeting because we've had an emergency. 60 years Pembroke Pines is. We have never, ever in the 60 years had anything like this. I'm mayor 22 and a half years, and I have never seen anything like this. Through Irma, through Wilma, Andrew missed us, thank God, but we've never had this much water at one time. And I want to explain to everybody, we had 12 to 16 inches of rain in one day. That was on top of a full month in October of rainy season. So the ground was already saturated. There was no place for it to go. I live on a lake, Pembroke Lakes. My dock and the seawall are still underwater. I've invited Kevin Hart. Are you on the line, Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Okay. Yeah, yes, we can. People are blaming everybody. I call this meeting and I want you to explain to us and the public what South Florida Management Water District did. And as King Tide is coming in this week, what do we expect from the South Florida Water Management District? So, Mr. Hart, thank you for being at our meeting, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Hope everyone can hear me okay.
Yeah, good.
Thank you. South Broward Drainage District, prior to the storm, we were operating all our pumps and gauge structures to go ahead and lower down all of our levels throughout our district. As you know, Mayor and Commissioners, we serve portions of 5 different municipalities throughout Southwest Broward County. The City of Pembroke Pines is actually split as far as our district goes, with most areas north of Pines Boulevard that flows into the C11 canal along Griffin Road, and the properties that are south of Pines Boulevard flow south to the C9 canal. In addition to that, all of the properties on the east side of I-75 up to Sheridan Street also flow south. So we were able to lower those levels in advance of the storm. Our pump stations down on the south side of the city, we have 5 pump stations that are along the south side of the city. Those were all operating well in advance of the storm. We had gotten record rainfall in October. I don't know if you mentioned that or not. In advance of this, we also, right around November 1st, got another 5 inches of rain. So our system on the south is capable of pumping 628,000 gallons per minute of water. We have been pumping that rate from before the storm, during the storm, and after the storm. Thankfully, on the eastern side of the city, we're really starting to see a drastic improvement. We're seeing our levels starting to come down and much improved from the peak of the storm. On the western side, especially along the Pines Boulevard corridor, we're still seeing some high levels, but we are seeing the stages starting to come down, which is a big relief. I do want to mention some other, I think, points of interest. We saw the C11 canal on the north side stage up higher than we've ever seen it here at our district, certainly in the last 30 to 40 years. We've never seen stages in the C11 that high before. That's significant because the properties to the far west end of our district, Silver Lakes, Chapel Trails, Keystone, and those communities all flow by gravity to the C11. We do not have a pump station at that end of our district as we do on the south side and further east up along the C11. So when that C11 stages up to that level, it makes it harder for us to move our water out. Thankfully, since the peak of the storm, we've seen that C11 start dropping, and it's dropping at a much higher rate now. They are definitely into a full recovery mode on the storm. We've seen that level there drop over 1.5 feet since the peak of the storm on Monday morning, and I'm confident that it's going to continue to drop at a steady rate now that we're looking at much drier weather into the weekend. By contrast, on the south side, the C9, that canal also staged up high as that's taking water in not only from Pembroke Pines, but from North Dade County and other cities to the east. That's tidal. That does not have a pump station. I failed to mention that the C11 canal does have a very, very large pump station that South Florida Water Management operates out there at US 27 and Griffin Road. Just for everyone's information, we were in touch with South Florida throughout the storm and after. That pump station has been operating at its maximum capacity. They have all their pumps running, and the capacity of that pump station is 1.6 million gallons per minute. And I just want everyone to kind of take that number in for a minute. And they've been pumping nonstop, 24/7, and that just illustrates the tremendous volume of rainfall that the area received. Out there at Pines and 172nd, South Broward recorded, I know you mentioned 12 inches in one day. We recorded 18.4 inches between Saturday and Sunday. That's in a 48-hour period. That amount of rain exceeds the both the intensity and rainfall amount for a 100-year, 3-day storm event. So that does speak well of the system, that we've had no reports of flood water in homes. And with that amount of water, that level of storm, that does speak well of the capacity of the system to store stormwater. I understand the issues now with trying to get the water out. South Florida's doing a tremendous job up on the C11, and now jumping back to the C9, where the C11 has dropped well over a foot, moving into over 2 feet. The C9 has only dropped about 6 inches since the peak of the storm. But the good news on that is that we have our pumps down on the south end. So we're able to pump against that high water. We've been doing that. It does make it harder for us to move water against that high head. You mentioned the king tides. That's going to impact. We do see impacts from the king tides up that C9, so that's not going to help our efforts. But even with that high stage downstream of our pump stations, we're still making steady progress in lowering stages. Just this morning, we did get permission from South Florida to increase our discharge rate along our permitted discharge rate along the C9. The approach is on a very cautious and closely monitored approach. So we can't just open up or start operating all of our additional pumps, but we do have permission on a very limited, cautious basis. And as the conditions permit, we are going to increase our discharge rate even more to the south. So obviously wish we could do more to get these water levels down faster, but our system is operating at its maximum capacity as far as the capacity of the system to move water out.
Okay, Mr. Hart, thank you for that great presentation. Looks to me like you've done everything you can. It's just a phenomena that approached us, and 18 inches of rain in one spot over a spongy ground surface already never makes it. So I'm glad you gave that great presentation. I'm going to open it up for commissioners to ask the chair of the South Broward Drainage District any questions they might have. So let me hear a name if you'd like to ask a question.
Castillo.
Commissioner Castillo, go ahead to Mr. Hart.
Thank you very much. Obviously, we are under an emergency. The residents of West Pines are very disappointed. We have never had to encounter a situation like this. And though engineers have told me that this is a once-in-a-century event, gentlemen, forgive me, but I just don't feel that lucky. I don't feel that lucky. I think that this is the new normal, and I think we need to plan for a new normal. While I trust my friend and colleague Kevin Hart explicitly, he is a great professional. This is in no way a personal shot. Maximum capacity at current conditions is insufficient to deal with the issues that we're dealing with. We're going to have to sit with the powers that be, and you shouldn't feel that you're alone in this unless you isolate yourself. You should come to the cities. We have influence over the people that make decisions, and we need to get this thing right. Now, I have a long list of questions the residents have been asking me, and I know that your staff or people associated with you are monitoring social media, and so I'm not going to go into all of the questions, all of the comments about people not being able to flush toilets, which isn't your job, but indirectly it's affected because of drainage infiltrating our sewer system. And I'm not going to talk to you about all of the flooding that they're complaining about, though it's there. Here we are 4 days into this thing, and 184th is still unpassable. I was there yesterday. You couldn't tell where the lake began and the street ended. You just couldn't tell. It was one sheet of water across. I had to go into a community to help someone get to a pharmacy because 4 days later, she thought she'd be able to do it. She couldn't. So I had to risk my own car. And it's not like, I'm patting myself on the back, but I had to risk my own car going to her house because she couldn't get out. And I think all of us are pitching in to do what we can. But this is way, way, way beyond anyone's imagination. And I hear it citywide, but certainly in West Pines, we are very, very disappointed. Now, I think that we need to get together, the city and you all, and review some things, because there are people asking very specific questions. For example, they're asking, how low did you? There's just so many questions to begin with. The first thing is we're having specific difficulty, I see, in areas such as Silver Lake, Chapel Trail, Walden Lake, Spring Valley. Those are the areas, Encantada, those are the areas that are calling me with problems. Some other communities are actually draining pretty well. So it doesn't appear that there's some evenness in this, and I could see where, because we're dealing with terrain and other factors. But if you've got an area like Chapel Trail that we know holds water significantly, there has to be some additional ability to push water out of there or divert water somewhere in the event of a thing like this, so that they get some relief. You can't have a whole community like Chapel Trail Estates underwater. We are now, once this dries up, we're now looking potentially at millions of dollars of damage to roads, to landscaping, to homes. Getting dry is just the first step of our recovery to this. Damage to the sewer systems. We've got potholes everywhere. By the way, Mr. Dodge, potholes, not sinkholes. And, and there has been very, very little communication to the people directly, what they should do. If your toilets don't flush, what should you do? If your house starts to smell, what should you do? If your sewer backs up, what should you do? There's been very, very little communication. It's sort of like from the last event that we had, which I'm not even going to mention, it was so frustrating, we didn't learn about what we have to do to communicate to people when we're in a crisis. And so they go on social media. We're dealing with them as best we can, some more than others, some much more than others. And I have to tell you that it's very, very frustrating because we do not have the answers. So the first thing is, even though the engineers are saying that this is a once-in-a-century event because of the amount of rainfall that we had, which I was told in my area was 19 inches, not 16 inches. I was told it was 19 inches of rain. We shouldn't feel that lucky. We should assume that this is going to happen. But I also have regular concerns that I have to bring up now because there's no other time to do it. We've had
Mr. Castillo, let me interrupt you. Do you have a question for Mr. Hart?
Mr. Mayor, I asked for this meeting 2 days ago. And I'm going to ask you to be patient while I represent the residents who have asked me to say
Mr. Castillo?
Yeah.
I'm the mayor.
Okay.
I called an emergency meeting.
Right.
But
Okay.
I think
I asked for this meeting 2 days ago.
Commissioner Castillo, I'm still talking.
Okay. You're interrupting me.
So, no, I'm not interrupting.
Yes, you are.
I'm the chair, and I'm asking
Okay,
you.
what is your question?
Oh, I just asked you if you'd be quiet.
Go ahead. What is it?
I said, do you have any questions for Mr. Hart? Because the other commissioners might. Then you can go into your dissertation.
Okay.
After that.
First of all, it's not a dissertation, it's a presentation, and I'll get to my question in a second. Thank you.
So, do you have any more questions for Mr. Hart?
I will get to my question in a second.
Okay,
Please
good.
do not interrupt me.
All right.
Thank you. So we have to start thinking differently about this. I just don't, I can't accept the excuses of once in a century. Okay? Now, My first question is, what was your assumption in terms of rain forecast for how much rain we were going to get? What was your assumption when this storm was approaching? How much rain in inches did you expect us to have?
Mr. Hart?
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And before I get to that, I just want to say one thing about your other comments. Number one, I agree with you completely about the fact that we shouldn't just assume this is not going to happen again. A 100-year storm, by the way, is not a storm that's going to happen once every 100 years. It's a storm that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. So we have seen in other parts of the country, areas get hit by more than the same level storm over time. And I'm more than willing, I would be very much pleased to come down and talk to your engineers and discuss things that we can do to improve beyond the level of flood protection that we had this storm, how to make it better, because I agree with you. And there's things that are in play out west, especially you mentioned Chapel Trail. The proximity of Chapel Trail to the conservation area and the levee, I do believe impacts their water levels. I do believe they are getting impacts of seepage. And those are the things that I think we can use to our advantage. And I appreciate you saying we're not in this alone, working with the city to talk to the state, talk to South Florida to come up with improvements. I have some ideas as well, and I would very much like to come in and share those with your engineers. As far as what we anticipated, there are all kinds of projections, but what we were looking at mostly were the projections from the National Hurricane Center that were showing anywhere from 10 to 15 inches of rain for our area, and that's what we were anticipating or looking at worst case, 10 to 15 inches.
And did you lower the lake levels by that amount?
We were able to lower approximately 1 foot in advance of the storm. We had a pretty heavy rain right around November 1st, almost 5 inches out. Again, Chapel Trail seemed to have gotten just for some reason this year, they were getting hit the hardest with the rain. But from that peak of stage that we had in early November, we did drop our levels almost 1 foot in advance of the storm, which we were actually very happy to get down that low.
Well, it wasn't enough. And maybe when we expect 15 inches, we should lower it 16 inches. Right?
Understood. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So that's the first. The second thing is, in terms of communication, do you have communications capacity in the middle of a crisis that maybe for the next time you can have people who can actually come out and help folks to understand as it's happening? I had to call 2 of your members to ask them to please put out a statement the third day of the storm. I think that you guys need to do that so that folks understand. I had people in Pembroke Pines writing us saying, why doesn't the city lower the lakes? Now, obviously, that you could see where the problem there is. That's not our responsibility. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask you to do that. So it's pretty clear now because you said that Chapel Trail and potentially that applies to other nearby communities have this intrusion problem. Don't you think we should develop some special efforts there, mechanically, engineering-wise, to push their water out even faster or more effectively than perhaps other communities that only, need a little bit less effort in order to get clear? It just seems to me that the water levels are too high.
Yeah, I think my opinion on that is if we can quantify, which hopefully we could, those impacts, then exactly what you're saying, that will give us the data that we can go to the state and see if it is possible. The one thing to remember is Chapel Trail flows through another community, so we do have to be conscious of that. We never want to impact any downstream communities with any of the measures that we take. But I think we can accomplish that if we have the right analysis done.
Well, I could see where this is important, because we drain to canals, and it's the canals that the South Florida Water Management District manage that either drain to the Everglades or out to shore. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it has to be a team effort. And I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but as far as this commissioner is concerned, I'd be surprised if anybody else disagreed. In Pembroke Pines, we want to partner with you to solve this problem. We're not saying you're in it alone. We want to support you in doing your job, but it has to get done. This can't happen again. Now, let me ask you a more practical question. By when do you project that Pembroke Pines will be dry?
I am projecting, or hopeful, but projecting that the roadways throughout the city will be dry within the next 2 to 3 days, hopefully sooner, certainly by the end of the weekend. The lakes are going to take a little bit more time. A lot of communities, we were out there today, almost all the roads are passable. We're now just seeing, not all the communities, but many of the communities, where the water is just at the low end of the roads, where the inlets are located. But if the elevations in the C9 continue to drop at the rate they're dropping, I'm pretty confident within the next 1 to 2 days, we'll have those roads dry. So at least people can get in and out. The lakes are going to take quite a bit longer to drain down to normal, but thankfully we're moving into some much drier weather in that regard.
Is there any, and this is for the engineers and for the city manager, is there anything that you all can think of that for areas like Chapel Trail, which are under 16 inches of water right now as we speak, that we can do in order to provide them with some relief? Is there some other place that we can divert that water to that could accept it, so that they drain faster? For me to turn around and inform the residents, something that you should be doing yourself, that it will take toward the end of this week, that it'll be a full week that they have to live in flood, is just beyond having to explain it to people. I'm trying to keep this thing from affecting property values. I'm trying to keep this thing from affecting the saleability of homes and communities, but this is just not acceptable. It's just not the answer we can accept. So can you guys think of a way that we can drain these communities faster and respond to this thing with greater urgency?
Mr. Hart?
Is that to me or to the city's engineer?
Anybody.
To me? Well,
Anybody.
Unfortunately, because of the widespread nature of the storm, if we were to divert the water anywhere else, it would have an adverse impact on those communities. For example, we have a gate at Pines Boulevard that could move water south, but south is into areas that are in the same predicament as the areas north. So we do look at those. But I think that the pump station that South Florida has at US 27, the tremendous capacity that station has, that is going to give the city the best drawdown that they're going to get for this storm. That's my personal opinion on it. We got the gates open and the water's going to move out, and I just I don't have any, unfortunately, I can't see any other locations where we could divert the water.
No,
I'm not sure about the city's engineer may have a different opinion on that.
Mr. Dodge, I have thousands of homes out west that can't flush the toilet, that can't do wash, that can't get out of their building, their community, that don't have cars that are tall enough, like I do, thank God, that can get through 16 inches of water. You got people landlocked in houses. They can't get to food. We got a serious problem here. And I understand that we have COVID, and that's keeping us from even opening up shelters where people might be able to go and take a shower or use a bathroom like a human being should be able to use one. This is just horrible, horrible. And it cannot happen again. We need to have better planning. We need to come together. It's not about finger pointing. It's about it. We have a problem, and it's going to happen again. We should be expecting that it's going to happen again. And damn it, we should solve this problem already. People are very angry.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, Mr. Hart. Mr. Hart?
Yes.
No.
Before I entertain Commissioner Seipel's comments, this phenomenon of this storm that would just comes like 100 years or whatever. Monday, it came. And it came with a force. Tuesday, the manager and I were discussing having an emergency meeting as to what we could do. And I'm going to get to the manager after all the commissioners ask you questions to find out what we did as a city to send vac trucks out. And I know we pumped out every lift station, but between us and Hollywood, which we are partnering with, and 4 others, it's just too much water on to those stations. We have been every year improving those, but every time we want to raise the price of something to make it faster, I mean, people complain about that. So we are commissioners of all the cities. One isn't just commissioner, we're all the commissioners. I'm the mayor of the whole city, and I want everybody to be satisfied. I put out emails, I put out focuses, I took and copied Detective Chief Justino's comments and put them out. And people come to me and say, some people don't have social media. And I could understand that. I asked Jim Ryan to put out a statement from your department. He did. I copied that and I put it on the mayor's page as well. So I don't want to say it's just a phenomenon. It happened. We're now can't go backwards. We're going to go forwards. And after we get all the commissioners to ask you a question, I've got a question for the manager. Commissioner Seipel, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. And I will have a couple of questions for Mr. Hart. But at first, I just wanted to say this has been something like we've never had before, and that doesn't make it any easier to deal with. I've been out for the last several days driving through communities, not just in my district, but in other districts, because I wanted to see how all of the west side was doing, how the east side was doing. And initially, when I started going out, everybody was in pretty bad shape. Everybody was in pretty bad shape. Fortunately, over the last yesterday and a little bit the day before, we did see some areas that were the water levels were going down. However, not going down enough to make the problem palatable or livable. I know my colleague keeps mentioning Chapel Trail, and I've been in and out through there. I've been on 186, and that's quite an experience to go north on 186 to see what's happening there. But I will tell you that also out in other communities such as the Silver Lakes area, Las Brisas, Brittany, Treasure Cave, all of those, they're underwater. They are underwater. They're only just starting to see their driveways recede a little bit from their, only just starting to see a small amount of that happening. I've been out every single day out in Hidden Lake. Hidden Lake is totally underwater, and they have not been able to flush toilets now for days. People are trying to get out to go to the nearby store to even have have a toilet to use. It's horrible. It's horrible what our residents are going through. Some of the communities that were mentioned, Keystone Lake, I was out there. They had some water, but surprisingly, they drained pretty quickly. And I don't know how that happened unless they're draining more directly into their own very large lake in that community. And so I'm not quite sure, but I'd like Mr. Hart at some point to kind of, not right now, but at some point to maybe give an answer as to how that happened in Keystone. I'm not saying that they're high and dry, but they drain. What I saw, they were draining quicker than some of the other areas. Towngate, which is still pretty much on the west side of our city, it's west of I-75, is horrible. I have nothing but continual emails, phone calls, messages from residents there, and I've been out there every single day going through that. Not just the main road coming in 145th, but obviously into the communities within the community of Towngate. They're underwater. They are underwater. Now I am getting a couple of folks that have said it's still really bad, but we do see maybe an inch or two movement on it. So while that is good news to hear, it's clearly, as for this commissioner, is not a sufficient enough answer. I think there are a couple things that Mr. Hart said, and I'm gonna repeat them, Mr. Hart, and I would ask you to confirm whether I understood correctly what you were saying. First off, you said we were talking about Chapel Trail, Silver Lakes, the Keystone area, and you said that that's the C11 area, and that there was no pump station near there. Was that a correct statement that you made? Did I hear that correctly, Mr. Hart?
Yes, just to clarify, there's not a pump station that South Broward Drainage District operates, so we're not pumping water out of our system into the C11 canal out west. To contrast that, you mentioned Towngate. From 184th Avenue East, we do have a pump station that we operate to pump water out from those communities all the way down to Pines Boulevard. It includes Towngate, Spring Valley, Pembroke Isles, into the C11. But west of 184th, we do not have a pump station that can pump into the C11 canal. But as I mentioned, South Florida Water Management District has a huge pump station that they operate out at Griffin Road and US 27, and the capacity of their pump station far exceeds anything we can pump. So those communities.
Well, yeah, I understand that. I know you said that the US 27 in Griffin is 1.6 million gallons per minute, I think was the number you referred to on that. And while that's very impressive, it's not helping. It's not helping. And so if we don't have a pump station near the area for this Chapel Trail, Silver Lakes, Keystone area, perhaps that's something that needs to be looked at for future, because obviously, as you've mentioned many times, we have these pumps that push the water, but we also rely on gravity quite a bit to help water move. And if one is too high, then the other, they're not going to drain properly. So while this can be and should be used as a sort of a learning curve, if you will, we now can point out areas that are insufficiently covered by drainage, whether you have a 100-year, or as you said, Mr. Hart, what that means is 1%, that it could happen every single year. That's what you said. It means 1% that it could happen every single year. That's not something I want to put our residents through again, that 1% every single year, because that means every year there is a possibility that this could happen. Probably unlikely, but it could happen. And we are really caught off guard and unprepared for this to happen. And again, not that I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but how bad as community leaders would we be if we didn't say, we have this, we acknowledge this problem, we're not going to live with it anymore, we're not going to accept it anymore, we are going to collectively work together and learn from what we are in the midst of right now on ways that we can effectively help these situations. While we can't stop Mother Nature, we can certainly deal with Mother Nature in a more efficient, safer, health-wise. I'm thinking of health issues also out there with this water floating around, and I see kids out there riding bikes and playing in all this nasty water, which they should not be doing. So I'm thinking of it also from health, health issues that we need to absolutely learn from this. And if we are to be the leaders in our communities, whether it's an elected official or whether it is a drainage district, staffing and the heads of these others, we need to collectively work together. We can no longer, and nor should we, no longer tell our residents, gee, sorry, I hope you're going to be dried up by the weekend, but I can't guarantee that. No, we should be able to say to them, listen, we can't control Mother Nature, but we damn sure can be better prepared for it. And we can flip a switch, and guess what? Maybe your water's not down today, but it's damn sure going to start being down by tomorrow, and you can live with, you can live with that. What we have now is unacceptable, and we do have to figure out ways to move forward. So I'm hoping that we will have learned sufficiently, that we will have put the emphasis on this, on how quickly we need to work on this, how quickly we need to continue pumping to every level that we can, and perhaps for some of those areas where we're not set up physically right at this point through equipment, what have you, to move it out, that we can get some more of the trucks out there moving water out and helping to lower, because it's my understanding when you start lowering in any area, it helps all of the areas because everything sort of works on a cycle. Lower here, then it fills in again, lower there, and it fills in to move the water out. Mr. Hart, you also mentioned something about what you are permitted to you get a permit to be able to move a certain amount of water in a certain period of time. Can you expound on that just a little bit more? Because I'm not quite sure that I heard everything you were saying on that.
Yes, I'd be happy to, Commissioner. Let's take the C11, for example. That is the major central canal that serves Pembroke Pines, Southwest Ranches, City of Weston, Town of Davie, Cooper City. All of these communities drain into that canal. And South Florida Water Management operates their pump station to allow the water to be drained from those communities. So what the state does is they put limitations as to how much water each community can drain into that canal so that there's adequate capacity for all of the communities that depend on that canal. For example, we couldn't just set up 3 or 4 pumps along Griffin Road and pump into the canal, because we would now impact communities that are downstream from us or upstream from us. So that's what I'm talking about when we have permits that our pump station and our gates and everything are designed and sized to allow us to put in the maximum amount of water that we're allowed to by permit. Now, sometimes if the water levels are too high, we don't meet that allowable because we don't have enough differential to push the water through. But as the level of the C11 comes down, we're going to increase our discharge into the canal. And the other thing, and we look at this and we coordinate with South Florida, as the system starts to recover, which it is doing right now, and the state feels that if we increase that rate of discharge, we're not going to have any impacts on upstream communities, they may allow us to increase. And in fact, they did that this morning on a very limited, cautious basis. So when we get that approval, we are going to take advantage of it.
Well, I think, and I appreciate that. That's what I thought that I understood you saying. So I have to say, to me, there's a flaw in that thought process, because if the issue is that we have these communities that have this storm and they're filled up with this water, and we can't move it, because if we move it, we're gonna negatively impact a surrounding community. That's a real problem, because there should be, listen, we've got Everglades, we've got the ocean. I don't know how you say I can't pump more water into the Everglades or into the ocean when we know that that's unlimited capacity. What it says to me is we don't have the setup or the resources to do that, to move water effectively out of areas without having a negative impact on other areas. And that's a problem, because that's always going to be a problem until we find a way to correct that. And I think that, again, saying, well, I have to wait until I get a permit to put more water out or whatever, there should be language that says when you come into a storm like this, there's safe open play set up to move this water out. So I guess my thought process is, we need to look at this from soup to nuts, because clearly, you can't do one without affecting others, nor should you do one and not know the consequences of doing others. But this overall plan and overall equipment and overall process of moving water out is old days. It's old school thought. We need to get into new school thought, which is possibility of this happening more often and more often is a reality. Normal drainage doesn't happen anymore, folks, because we are so built out everywhere and we don't have that kind of drainage that we've always had. And that's another big effect that hasn't been discussed in any of this discussion. But that is a factor when you don't have that natural ability to do that. So, Mr. Hart, my thought is, soup to nuts, we've got a problem. Soup to nuts, we've got a problem. A lot of issues have been brought up today, and I would fully expect that collaboratively, we are going to have to force the powers that be to come up with a better plan, because clearly this is not working for our residents. It's not working for our residents. It's not working for businesses. It's not working for our schools. It's not working for the health of our community, the physical health of our community. It's certainly not healthy for the financial part of our community. I drove, as I've been driving through, and I've been driving through, every day, different communities. These communities, when they finally do get all dried out and can go in and make an assessment of what has happened in their communities, are going to have jaw drops, I believe, because I've seen people driving on curbs, on the sidewalks, up on everywhere, and just those things are going to be destroyed. The streets I'm running into potholes everywhere that I'm going now on these streets. And it's going to be a huge financial also, as well as a big health issue, because God only knows what kind of germs and stuff are out there, in addition to what how we're so restricted right now with COVID and everything else. So my final is, listen, we've got a lot of communities out there. Like I said, Silver Lake, Las Brisas, Brittany, Treasure Cove, Treasure Bay, Town Gate, Hidden Lakes. I was there late yesterday afternoon, and one lady came up to my car and she was crying, and she said, Commissioner, I can't believe it. She said, I've lived out here for all of these years. I've never had anything like this, but I just want to tell you, I'm a family of 5, and I am finally able to flush one toilet in our house. A family of 5 that has been living all these days with no toilet flushing, finally, and she was crying that she was able to at least be able to do that. Our residents should never have to experience anything like that for any time. So again, my final to everyone, Mr. Hart, to everyone that's listening is, we've got to find a solution that's a soup to nuts. What we have right now, again, is old school thought, old school equipment, and it doesn't meet today's standards. We need to get that new thought out there, that new process out there, and we need to figure out how we can safely take care of what we could almost be assured is going to happen again and again, but that our residents and our businesses are not ever put in a position like this, because this is totally acceptable. And we now have had conversation where we can figure out where the really bad areas are and how do we work with those, what the problems are, and get that new school thought out there. So Mayor, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I do hope that my message was heard loud and clear, that we will no longer accept this, but we're not pointing fingers. We're in this together, and we will find a solution. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other commissioners have a question for Mr. Hart.
Schwartz.
Vice Mayor Schwartz?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, thank you for calling the meeting. Mr. Hart, it's always good to see you. This is probably the one time that, I wish we didn't have to have the conversation, but we are.
Excuse me, Vice Mayor. By the way, I don't mean to interrupt. Those shots you took, aerial, were great shots.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Hart, you've looked over our community for many, many years, and I just want to thank you. I want to thank your board. I want to thank Mr. Dodge. I want to thank Mr. Cooper. I want to thank our city engineer, Carl Kennedy, and James Mulvaney, and our Public Works Department, who have taken on, I can't even describe or even imagine how much lack of sleep they've had in order to try to provide relief to our community. And there are many, many other public works and city engineers throughout our community experiencing the same. Mr. Hart, I see the Everglades almost daily. I'm out flying out in the area. I saw after the rain that we took on in after October the 15th, the news reports that said, "Oh, we're out of the rainy season, October 15th," and then we just got absolutely hammered for the next 2 weekends. The Griffin Road pumping station I see every day. Last week, I wrote to the city manager, and based on my observations of what I was seeing out west before the storm and what was being forecast, unfortunately, I had predicted that we were going to have a significant flood event in the city. Now, you had mentioned that your forecasts were based on NOAA and the Hurricane Center. You had mentioned that the water levels were lowered by 1 foot. My first question is, what does 1 inch represent? How many, gallons of water does that represent? What does 1 foot represent when it comes to rainfall? I mean, is it a 1-to-1 ratio? You lower 1 foot for 12 inches of rain. You lower it for 1 foot for 15 inches of rain. How does that work?
I have done some calculations on that. Just to put it in perspective, 15 inches of rain over our entire district. We run from Griffin Road down to the county line, from US 27 to University, give or take. 15 inches of rain over that 73 square mile area represents a little over 19 billion gallons of water. That's 15 inches. In some areas, as you know, we got more than that.
And what rate per hour or maybe per day can be moved during normal times? Like, how long would it take you to lower 1 foot, and how many gallons does that represent?
Okay, well, to lower, if you just do the rough numbers, and it's there's other things that go into it, but just trying to get a very broad perspective of the time that you mentioned.
Sure.
I looked at our C9 basin to the south. This is not the areas north of Pines, it's just to the south. To lower 6 inches of water, based on the pumping rate that I mentioned that we have, which is 628,000 gallons per minute, that would take 5 days. We're doing well, much better than that. We're not taking that kind of time to lower the water at that level. The way the system will work is the first couple days are going to be the most difficult because that's when the system's starting to balance out and reach a point of equilibrium. And then once all the water balances, we're still moving out the same rate, but you got water moving different areas within the system, then the whole basin starts coming down. So the areas that we're pumping through these pump stations, they average about 6,500 acres. They're large areas that we're trying to move water out. And it's not just one community's lake, it's all the communities. Commissioner Seipel was asking about Keystone. Everything is interconnected. So where you see communities that may be doing better, it's my opinion, it's going to be attributed to they got less rainfall or their roads are higher. They were built up higher when they were originally designed. But for the most part, the water should all be equal. And what we saw in this rain, which we've never seen before, is the lake levels actually came up above the grates in the streets. Now that's what they're there for, because they're protecting the homes from flooding. But I'm in complete agreement with the commission in that this is something we should look at and look at ways we can improve on this in the future. Look at emergency provisions that we can put in place, coordinate with South Florida Water Management District, because I believe completely that we don't want to just sit idly and say, well, this will never happen again. I think we do need to look at solutions to improve upon what happened. We had good flood protection during the storm, but we need to do better after.
Mr. Hart, thank you for your explanation. And you had mentioned head pressure, and that's hydrostatic pressure, water tables. All those things have significant impacts. And one of the things that I had noted, and I've spoken with the manager, I guess it would have been Monday afternoon, late Monday evening, is that we started noticing the rise of water when it should have been going the other way. And if you think about the amount of rain that hit our area, it's going to find its lowest point. And after a 24-hour period, then it starts to pull. Explain the governor's role with respect to the South Florida Water Management District. Are they elected officials? Are they state bureaucrats? Has there been any request for the National Guard? Has there been any request for additional equipment in order to support South Florida?
Thank you, Mayor. The South Florida Water Management District Board is appointed by the governor. So those are appointed positions. I have not personally seen anything come across my feed where the governor's declared any type of declaration of emergency. That's important. That's something maybe the city could reach out. That opens up for federal funds. Just in line with what everyone's talking about in trying to make these improvements, funding is going to be critical. And if together with the city, we can get some funding either through the state or FEMA, they have funds available just for this type of situation. Mitigation funding, I know the city was successful in getting some mitigation grants. And if anything qualifies for grants and assistance and mitigation, I think this event is going to be at the top of the list.
So Mr. Hart, we know that the Army Corps of Engineers have guided our federal government with respect to the Lake Okeechobee and the banks. My greatest fear is having a bank collapse like as what happened in New Orleans. And every year there's a can that gets kicked down the road and they're not making the infrastructure investment. I understand that along the Sawgrass Expressway, that dike is also a concern. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, if this storm would have been up in Belglade and we would have had a breach, 3 days later, all that water would be in Chapel Trail. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if it would have all been in Chapel Trail
Well, you see,
necessarily,
I'm
but
saying
it was not.
as far as the downstream
Yes,
effect, when you have a large body of water with, with hydrostatic pressure, it's going to move and it's going to find its way to the lowest point. Is that
right.
correct?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so the governor's appointed board ties your agency to a permit where you have to ask permission so that you don't flood out other communities. Is that correct? That's what I heard.
It's correct, but I do want to, for everyone's information, because I don't want to send the wrong message, they have always been very supportive of us. They've always considered any request we made. In fact, they gave us permission earlier this morning. We are a strong partner with South Florida Water Management District. We depend on them very much for our drainage. We drain into them, and I just really, from the district standpoint, we have a very good, strong, cooperative relationship with South Florida Water Management, just as we do with the city and your engineering folks. I can't.
Kevin, I was just going to say that yes, the three, South Water Management District, the SBDD, City of Pembroke Pines, and the surrounding community, we are all in this together and we support one another. That the key though is what I haven't heard is what, unless I missed it, we have king tide. We had an easterly. We had the storm coming in from the east, and it blew hard, over 25 miles an hour, for almost three days, almost 72 hours. So, is the decision to move it, to pump water out to the ocean, is that based on wind? Does it get pumped out to the Everglades based on wind? How's it determined which way it goes?
Okay, there on the C11, there's a drainage divide at Palm Avenue. South Florida, if you drive down Griffin Road, you'll see they have a structure that traverses the whole canal. From that point west, everything flows to the S9 pump station, which gets pumped into the Everglades.
Got it.
Everything east, they have a much smaller pump station at 441 that will move that water east. On very rare occasions, they may open that gate one way or the other. I haven't heard that it's been open for this storm because same principles. Everyone's impacted the same. And then on the C9, and this is important as well, that's completely tidal. There's no pump station. South Florida does not have the opportunity to take mechanical measures like they do on the C11 to lower stages in the C9. And you see, I can tell you, what I mentioned before, this isn't, I think this is something that when we get together and talk, something we should bring to their attention. Since the peak of the storm, the C11's come down over 2 feet. The C9's only come down less than a foot, maybe 8 inches. So and now with the king tides coming, so that's significant in my opinion. Just something that when we sit down and go over everything and options and ways that we can improve. But that's the divide. The decisions are made based upon, as you mentioned, Commissioner, the levels in the conservation area. But in my experience here, when it comes to flood protection, they're always going to err on the side of that. For example, they have 3 large pumps at the S9, and then they have 2 smaller pumps that they really don't operate in conjunction with the large pumps, but they have every pump that they're capable of pumping out there right now to try to help the communities along the C11.
All right, so Mr. Hart,
Mayor, point of information. Mayor, point of information.
Commissioner Castillo, point of information.
Vice Mayor, excuse me for interrupting you. I very much like and appreciate the line of questioning that you're having. I just wanted to make the body aware that yesterday I asked Carl Kennedy, and this morning I received an email from the city engineer indicating that Chapel Trail is not any lower than any other community in western Pembroke Pines, and I wouldn't want that to be an assumption that's made in the record. I want to read the email very quickly. Commissioner, based on my research...
If I may, Commissioner Castillo, Mr. Hart...
Based on my research, the level of service for Chapel Trail communities has the same for all communities in western Pembroke Pines. Road crown elevations that will be no lower than the elevation for the respective area depicted on the Broward County flood criteria map, which represents the 10-year, 3-day storm as published by Broward County. The email goes on, and I would enter that into the record, and I would ask the city manager to please provide a copy to the entire commission. Thank you very much, Vice Mayor, for your patience. Thank you.
And I received this.
Yeah, and thank you. And Mr. Hart had mentioned that the head pressure of the actual Everglades has the greatest impact on Chapel Trail. So it's a matter of a higher body of water being held by the dike, and then what impact it has everything east of that. So Mr. Hart, just a couple more questions, and then I'm going to move to the city manager. The Griffin Road pumping station, the canal intersects the Miami Canal. What's the flow of the Miami Canal? Who's moving that, and how quickly is it being moved?
I can't speak specifically on the Miami Canal, but what I've been told, what I was told by South Florida, and some of my discussions on this storm is that our water moves through, and some of the improvements that you're reading about in the Everglades that the governor is initiating to try to increase the flow of water south into the bay, that's going to help us. Those are initiatives that are going to increase the flow rate through the conservation area to the south. I'll have to research that a little bit more on the Miami Canal and get back to you, Commissioner. I apologize. I don't have that.
And again, I apologize for blindsiding you with questions on live TV, right? So the C9 gravity feed, does that go into the Miami Canal?
That goes all the way to, no, it does not. It goes to the intercoastal through they have a tidal control gate right down there near Reynolds Park that they'll use that to control high tides, but that's strictly gravity. And while you're on the C9, if I could, because I had a resident ask me a question, I just want to clarify. On the C9, we have 5 pump stations, and we operate a total of 12 pumps. So it's not just 5 pumps, it's 5 pump stations. Each one has anywhere from 1 to 3 pumps in there. So we simultaneously will be running 12 pumps at a time along the C9.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. And moving back in-house. Mr. Dodge, I had a question for Mr. Cooper.
Go ahead.
Mr. Cooper, thank you for putting together a very informative video. I think it's probably one of the best pieces of information that's been produced. And I think it speaks volume to the professionalism and commitment to our residents and the surrounding community, because it helped many people even outside of Pembroke Pines to understand what was really going on. Mr. Cooper, we have a treatment plant out west, and Hollywood treats some of our eastern community there. The hamster that spins the wheel is only so big. Can you explain, based on what Mr. Hart is saying, how many more days it's going to take for roads to clear? When can we anticipate getting back to a sense of progress with respect to the ability for us to flush?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and Commissioners, this is John Cooper, Utility Director. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Mr. Vice Mayor, thank you for asking, and thank you for your compliment. And may I just say that you have a fantastic crew here with a number of teams and team leaders that made this all work. And I'm very thankful to them for the success that we are having in this very, very unprecedented and difficult situation. So to answer your question, the general rule of thumb that I'm using is when the streets are flooded, the sewers are flooded. And so once the streets are no longer flooded and the manholes are no longer submerged, the major component of the problem to the sewer will be relieved. However, the ground is still saturated, as everybody so far, the commissioners have clearly stated, the previous storms have saturated the ground. So we still receive a lot of contribution to the sewer through the ground. It's not possible to say when that's going to occur. So I don't mean to be evasive, but I will say that we are pumping, and as you know, we have, I think, 6 tanker trucks going from station to station, relieving the worst conditions. And what my answer would be, sir, is that we will continue to work that in an emergency basis, going from station to station until the matter is resolved. But nobody can say when it's going to be 100% gone. When the streets are no longer flooded, that'll be the lion's share of the problem. And in fact, as of yesterday, we had, I think we had 16 areas of concern, and we were down to 3. So things are progressing, but I sure would hate to put a number on it, sir.
No, that's fine, Mr. Cooper. And I was with Mr. Mulvaney late yesterday regarding some of the efforts being made. And again, I'm just extremely grateful and thankful for all of the effort. I do have a question though, Mr. Cooper. In the video, you had mentioned about HOAs having responsibility for their drains, and there are some HOAs who admittedly may not know that the video is even available. I want to take this opportunity to, I guess, hoping that maybe they're watching now. Can you explain the responsibility of the city, the responsibility of the HOA, and then finally, it may be a Carl Kennedy question, what happens when the city and or a resident asks for a variance for drainage on their property? And have we looked at the number of properties that may have requested a variance that may be causing some of the issues that we're experiencing today?
Okay, so to the first question, the answer is that generally speaking, private roads are maintained by the private groups. So if your neighborhood has a guard gate, that would be a very good indicator that your road is private. And so all of the maintenance of that road are the responsibility of the homeowners association. And so that's the general rule of thumb that we use. If it doesn't have a guard gate, it's likely to be a public road. And so what I was trying to say in the video is encouraging folks to inspect and clear their catch basins, the structures that take in the drainage water, because they can very easily get clogged, covered in leaves and sticks and plastic and all this stuff that's we know floats around in the floods. And so if they're clogged, it's going to take a heck of a lot longer to drain. And all the great work that Mr. Hart and the district are doing to feverishly reduce the water levels will be hampered if the water cannot get into the drain. So that's what I was trying to say. As far as the exemptions for drainage, sir, could you be a little bit more specific about your question, please?
Sure. Let me circle back on what you just mentioned with respect to HOA responsibility and the city's responsibility to notify the HOA that a storm is coming, and we encourage them to clear their drains. I had sent an email out to the administration early last week requesting that storm drains in known low-lying areas be inspected and repaired as necessary, along with the request for sandbags. What has the city done in the past? What can we do better to ensure that the HOAs are compliant? And if an HOA, if you're saying that if an HOA storm drain isn't clear, that it's impacting Mr. Hart and the drainage district's ability to move water, what repercussions are there? What can we do as a city to help the situation?
Sir, that's a great point. And I'm afraid I don't have the history on that question. And I'm sure we could work something out. But if anybody else has a staff member here has a better answer than that, I would go on standby and wait for their answer.
All right, and then finally, Mayor, and this is just my last comment. I want to thank our police department and our fire department for storm assessment. I encourage everyone to follow the Pembroke Pines Police Department Facebook page. They have been giving updates about passable roads, non-passable roads, what's being closed. The fire department and I, we crisscrossed a few times on Monday doing storm assessment. So, I mean, again, this is a difficult situation on everyone involved. There's none of us here who don't want to see it fixed like yesterday. But thank you again, Mr. Hart and Mr. Mayor for calling this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to keep my comments a little bit brief. My colleagues have all spoke very, very well about this issue and have asked all the right questions. And I really don't have much more to add, knowing that this has been a career responsibility for me, no less. So thank you to my colleagues for doing an exceptionally fine job. I do want to make a statement about South Broward Drainage District, in particular to Kevin Hart, who is the executive director.
Excuse me, Commissioner Good. We have some background. Could everyone who's not on the call please mute yourself? Commissioner Good, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I do want to say that that we are very, very fortunate to have somebody like Mr. Hart in the role that he plays. Mr. Hart has a very, very, very long career within Broward County. He's worked with some of the top, most notable engineering firms within Broward County, and he's been performing in this role for quite some time. I can tell you that his knowledge and experience and technically and operationally is unprecedented in all of Florida. And so we are very, very fortunate to have top executive, top tech person working for us, and I have great respect for everything that he says and does, and I have no reason not to believe him when he says he is doing everything, or that district is doing everything possible to provide us the relief that we are expecting. So, having said that, I just want to say too that I support evaluating our infrastructure, as been mentioned several times. I believe that we need to look forward in terms of hardening our systems in order to prevent these impacts in the future. But I will say, acts of God are not always resolved. And when acts of God happen, sort of like a hurricane, one of the things that we do is we actually have a defined emergency response plan. So, hurricane comes, we know how to maneuver and position people and equipment and all kinds of things in order to provide the relief to our community. With this is sort of an unprecedented emergency, sort of like maybe caught us a little off guard because, what does the city of Pembroke Pines do in terms of flood management when you already have a district that manages that? So we're sort of, it's a little bit new to us. So we need to also, though, take this and define an appropriate response plan, just like we would do for a hurricane. So, there are things that we can do. For instance, I've heard I believe it was Commissioner Seipel who mentioned about people not even being able to do a simple thing such as using a restroom facility. So why can't we not provide right now, portable washroom facilities that could, sort of like the ones they use at the large events, and just drop them in some of these communities that may find that as a relief. At least it's not the best, but it's better than what maybe they're having to do right now if they're having to run to the store. This could be an opportunity. And so there are certainly other things that we can do to provide relief. If we cannot get rid of the water, we're so focused on the water, we want to get it gone, but there are probably a lot of other things that we can do in the absence of being able to get rid of the water. And I think some of those things can happen now if we just put our minds to it. So, my focus is going forward. My focus is what we can do now, even the little things on the side in order to help the relief. But again, I do commend my colleagues for having such a great handle on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Good. All good comments. Let me just say that Mr. Hart, in 22 and a half years I'm mayor, every time we have called you, asking you a question, you've always been very responsive. So I think you're doing the best job you can. I have no intention as a mayor trying to take over South Florida Drainage District. I really don't. But the parties are working together. We've had a phenomenon. We weren't talking about doing anything 2 years ago. We weren't talking anything about it last year. We weren't talking about doing anything a month ago. As Commissioner Good adequately pointed out, it happened. And now we're going to talk about it. And what I'd like to do, and I've always done this, I'd like to bring all the parties together. And we're in a COVID situation. Commissioner Good talked about outhouses. Don't know how that fits in with the COVID. But we're on a COVID situation. We're in a storm situation. But Mr. Dodge, I have always wanted to bring the parties together. Now that we had this phenomenon, and I believe all the commissioners are saying the same thing, I'd like to bring all the parties together to see how we can alleviate this happening again. And Mr. Hart, I live on the C11 side. I'm west of Palm, east of Flamingo. My lake, which is part of Pembroke Lakes, is so far over that my dock is underwater completely, and my seawall is 4 feet into the lake. So I'm on the C11 side. So Mr. Dodge, can you just give us a quick interpretation, a quick explanation of what we did and what we can do? Is my request to have a meeting of all the minds?
Yes, Mayor. As we received numerous emails from residents in regard to the flooding, we addressed and actually tried to have a conversation with each person who communicated with us. And once the issue of the problem with the flushing of toilets became a major issue. John Cooper Utilities and our utility operators, we obtained a number of tankers in addition to the ones that we possessed, and we started going out into the areas that were having most difficulty to try to provide that relief. So as we were doing that, and as some of the water was receding, it did provide assistance because the number of calls we were receiving started to diminish. We're continuing to do that, and Mr. Cooper, we still have those vehicles in place, and as he says, we're down now to about 3 communities that are still experiencing some of this difficulty. I do know for a fact our staff did ride into those areas again today, along with our police department, who has been evaluating this and providing us with reports on a daily basis. We've had our public service staff go out, and we've actually even measured some of the water in areas where on one night, I think on 186, it started at 30 inches. The other day was down to, it reduced to 18, then 10. I believe this morning there were some areas still with 7. Some of the lanes are open on one side. We do have a lot of issues to deal with, such as potholes. Some people may have misunderstood those to be sinkholes, but we do have a number of potholes that we have to deal with throughout the community, which we will continue to do. But utilities is staying on top of it as we keep hearing about the situations with the stormwater intrusion within our wastewater system. We are addressing it, and we'll continue to address it right until it is resolved. And I believe that should be within the next few days if the water table continues to recede so there is no water in our roadways. We will also be setting up a meeting with Mr. Hart, along with our own engineers and our utilities, to brainstorm some of these issues. But once again, there are other federal, state agencies that place many of the requirements on what we can or cannot do. So if there's a solution we can come up with that might change that, then we might need to address those things publicly to ask for assistance in seeing if any of those can be changed to help us in the future.
Mayor, I have one last comment.
Commissioner Castillo.
Thank you very much, and I want to commend you for being patient with the comments of my colleagues, and also for your calling the notion of calling together everyone involved to see if we can get to a better place with this discussion. Obviously, we all agree that that's what we want, and it was a predictable outcome of the meeting such as this. But I also want to say that even when it isn't in an emergency period, the levels of water that are carried in our drainage ditches, and we fondly refer to them as lakes, but they are drainage retention systems. They're there for drainage. That is the purpose of our lakes, are consistently above the level of the drain pipes that go into them. And quite simply, when the water exceeds the drain pipe, the drain can't work. And that applies not just in Pembroke Lakes, it applies in the golf course, it applies in HOAs, it applies on our major roads. You got to keep the water level below the drains, or land can't drain. And we're constantly having to complain about this, and I know that Kevin and his group are under perhaps difficult requirements that are imposed on them. I don't know what, but those requirements are going to have to be revisited. We now have a new environmental phenomenon worldwide, and yesterday's rules don't fit today's reality anymore. So we're going to have to sit down and we're going to have to accelerate the process. And there's no one brighter than an engineer or more stubborn. And so we have to sit down and we have to get the engineers to understand the people are not satisfied with the level of service that we're getting. We're going to have to change some of the rules. So I look forward to a robust discussion. When do you think we can get together and call together the people from the from the district, perhaps our new state reps, perhaps our new state senator. Let's get everyone in the room so that we can try to resolve this issue.
Thank you,
Mr.
Commissioner
Mayor?
Castillo. And hold on. That's what I had just asked the manager. City Attorney.
Yes, sir.
Question to you.
Sure.
COVID, now with all these meetings, and the governor opened up for a full meeting, how do we participate in that kind of a meeting, which I'm now finding everybody, of course, wants to have? How do we have all the parties involved? We could do it, I guess, through Zoom or whatever. But
Mayor.
I think you're seeing the urgency of this commission to have that meeting.
If I may, Mayor, thank you very much for the inquiry. And these are difficult times, and there are some difficult and challenging legal questions, all of which kind of redound back to the governor's office in some respects because of the suspension, or at this point, the elimination of the virtual quorum, virtual meeting order. That being said, today was a very special circumstance, which I made on the record very clear. You have only 2 physically present today, and you have 3 commissioners who are present and interactive under the CMT guidelines, but they're not physically here. And I think given your declaration of Sunday, this is a very specific and very special event to allow this to be conducted. It would be the wish of the mayor and the commission and the city administration to joint venture in conversations with the South Florida Water Management District or with the South Broward Drainage District. The same rules of the road apply with regard to the physical presence of their commissioners, but that does not mean that you couldn't otherwise, at least in an attempt to shore up, so to speak, in exigent circumstance, have various boards meet in a Zoom concept or in a virtual concept, particularly in light of the fact that the governor's order referencing COVID-19 is still in place regarding the state emergency. So if there's a will to have a joint mutual meeting among other public bodies who would otherwise be able to attend in their own individual capacities and then join them together, we'll find a way to get there if the like minds of my colleague lawyers on those organizations can think through the box and figure out how to fix the problem by having those meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Gore. Mr. Dodge?
Yes, Mayor. I think prior to setting up that meeting, I think it would be better for the professional staff, both from the South Broward Drainage District and our staff, to talk about the issues and what options there may or may not be before we bring in the bodies that make those decisions. We've got to present them with a concept, with an idea for them to consider as we move forward. And I think Kevin Hart, working with Carl Kennedy, John Cooper, our staff, we need to discuss that. We'll bring that forward to you, then set up a meeting.
Can you entertain that?
I will make sure that happens, okay?
All right, is there anybody on the line, Mr. Benil? Is John still with us?
I'll tell you in a minute.
Do we have any else?
Yeah, Jonathan's there. Go ahead, John.
Mr. Benil, do we have any outside people that want to speak?
There's a lot of people on the line, but I don't know.
I don't know.
Jonathan, you need to unmute yourself.
Go ahead, Mr. Benil.
Yes, thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
We do.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, we've had some people comment on via the WebEx platform, but if anybody would like to speak, right now the mayor has given the public forum. If you can please raise your hand. I've placed instructions in the chat mechanism of this WebEx platform to know how to raise your hand to be able to speak. And if you're a caller and would like to raise your hand so you can be unmuted and you can make a public comment, you have to press *3 in order to make your public comments. I will give you a couple of seconds in order for you to be able to raise your hand.
Mr. Mayor, while Mr. Benil is waiting for the hands to be raised, just for the record, any chat offerings by the public who has been given the fullest and easiest pathway possible to access this meeting, those chats are in fact public records, public documents, and will be added to this record, whether they're read into the record or not, or otherwise accepted. They are part of the record, as the direction will be of the mayor and commission when you adopted your CMT guidelines. So they're all part of today's discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Benil, you now have more time.
Perfect. Thank you, City Attorney. Yes. So we have a caller by the number of 9542, and it finishes with the last two digits of 21. I'm going to unmute you. Please state your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you. Okay. It seems like the person is having a little bit of difficulty unmuting themselves. If you would like to unmute yourself to speak, you've already raised your hand. Please press *6.
All right, can you go
Telephone
on
number
again?
Yeah, telephone number
unmuted. Can you hear me?
9542. Yes, we can. Please state your name,
Good.
address.
This is Robert
and
Young.
you
I
have
live
3
in
minutes
Chapel
to speak.
Trail Estate. I keep getting somebody trying to talk over me, but I'm very concerned about the way that you're treating homeowners associations out here. We're volunteers. We're on the board. In fact, I'm on 2 boards, one in Chapel Lake, one in Chapel Trail. We try to keep up with everything, but our residents out here do not understand when the city continues to state that homeowners associations are responsible for the drainage out here and responsible for the access and so forth. We have no say in any of that. It's up to the city. Right now, our sewers are overflowing. We can't flush out here. And we're being told that we're a private community and we have to take care of this ourselves. This is not correct. And I know Mayor Ortiz said that he put a lot of info out on social media, but I'm on almost every social media that we have out here. And the only people that I've heard from is Commissioner Castillo and I think Commissioner Seipel. But nothing is coming out here. We get no information from the city. And we do sign up for Nextdoor, we sign up for Facebook, and yet we don't have that information. We have seen no city trucks out in our community doing any kind of a survey. The only people that have responded greatly has been the police department. Now, our homes are getting flooded because people drive through the community. We have no control over that. At excessive speed, they've never been in a boat. They don't know that a wave will come in and wash up into the homes. And we've got some flooded homes just in Chapel Lake Estates, and I don't know about the rest of Chapel Trail. So yeah, if you're going to have a commission and a committee and all this, please include your homeowner associations and your board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Let me just say, Mr. Mayor, I have put out those messages on my website, as the mayor's website, on several occasions. I can't believe you haven't seen that, and I'm sorry about that. But I have done that through our person that puts out all of the information. I mean, I put up Mr. Cooper's information on that same website, so I apologize. And I understand your concern about the homeowners. Felipe Venturi's been calling me about being underwater. Again, I've been putting out, and the city's been putting out a lot of messages. Appreciate your call.
Mayor?
Hold on.
Mayor,
Hold on. Mr. Dodge, do you have any comment for Mr. Young?
For who, Mayor?
Mr. Young, he said about the homeowners, it's their responsibility. Do you have any?
Well, I don't know how that interpretation came about. I know it has been mentioned that the drainage that is on private roadways is the responsibility of an HOA, but not those within a community that have public roadways in it. But the issue is not only those that are in the public right-of-way, also within the private gated communities, the drainage isn't working because of the water levels. So there's no fault to neither the HOA in that situation or the city. As far as reports of toilets not flushing in areas, whenever we get those complaints, we do go out and we have even not at random, but we've scheduled all of the lift stations to provide relief to the communities with the stormwater intruding upon our wastewater lines. We've been out there pumping out lift stations. We continue to do so. I will make it a point right now, and I believe Mr. Cooper's on the line. He's hearing this conversation. We'll make sure that we identify those lift stations in Chapel Trail to make sure they're checked today and continue to be checked. But I don't think the city is saying to anybody, it's your problem, don't worry about it, we're not going to help. That's not the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Ms. Graham, you want to?
Mayor, if I may, the gentleman who spoke before, I just wanted clarification about his name.
Robert Young.
Robert
It
Young.
was Robert now? Thank you.
Robert Young. Okay, Mr. Benito.
Thank you, Mayor. Nobody else has raised their hand in the WebEx platform. What I would say is that I believe the city clerk does have an email that was sent as a public comment that would like to be read on the record.
City clerk.
There was a message, but it was not pertaining to the emergency meeting.
All right, thank you.
Perfect.
All right,
Thank you.
I think we've had a very good meeting. Mr. Dodge, you have a direction from the commission?
Yes, Mayor, I do.
And commissioners, thank you for coming in this meeting. We're gonna have to do a lot of things we never did before, and quickly. So, again, we have 2 weeks left of the hurricane season. Hopefully that'll go through with no problems. And Mr. Dodge, we look forward to the meetings.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Gorham.
Yes, Mayor, just for the record, recognizing the exigency of today's circumstances, Mr. Dodge has received the commentary from the commission as a collegial body. Absent a direct motion to the contrary and absent objection from any commissioner, he will proceed consistent with that conversation. Should anyone, any third party outside this room challenge the decision being made today by the commission, I support the method by which it's being made, and the manager has direction legally from the city commission. Thank you.
All right, do we have consensus? Yes. If I don't hear anybody, we'll say we have consensus?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Dodge. We have consensus.
Thank you, Mayor. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Be safe.